Hello, everyone. And for those that are joining today, welcome. And those that are watching this live replay, welcome as well. Um, this week, we are going to talk about everyday omens again. And really to start this channel and in preparation for the book that I am producing this year in 2024, which is titled As the Universe, So the Soul, Everyday Omens and What They Mean. It's important to give more context into the history of what omens are, how they've been translated and passed down through different civilizations and cultures through the centuries, and really like where I've been resourcing all of this information for what could possibly be the first volume of omens, since they are extremely extensive. um, no joke. I have sourced so many different publications, many of which are in the open and public access domain, because they were published hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago. And really, it started. So, I guess I should say one of the things that I got into in last week's live was how I came into this remembering of omens, the everyday practice of omens, and being able to, um, validate their acknowledgement of a current energetic state and emotional or mental state that you're in, or a forecasting of, future events. And so definitely check out my personal history and that live, which happened last week. But long story short, I grew up on a farm in this lifetime in southwestern Washington. And I had grandparents that had been in farming communities in Montana during the Depression. And a lot of what I'm about to go into, especially about where you can find everyday omens now, a very, very small snippet of the extensive information that I've been compiling, researching, like I said, actively living for years, this entire lifetime, that have been handed down by my family for many, many generations, that I have been remembering and resourcing for this first book or this first volume, as well as practicing now actively for the last 4 years. But what we're going to get into today is where you can still find some of these. Um, areas of everyday omens, even though it is a very small snippet of what it is that I've been working on and compiling for everybody. And that is within the Farmer's Almanacs. And there are two of them. There are the Old Farmer's Almanac, which is what I have here, which is what I grew up with. And this was produced for the first time in 1794 in the United States. And there is the Farmer's Almanac, which was the second one, and it was produced in 1818. And they both kind of take on their predictions or their forecasting in different ways. But it is the Old Farmer's Almanac that I grew up with, that I have participated with this entire lifetime, and that I'll get into today as one of the areas where you can see kind of a very wide breadth of how everyday omens um, have shown up, and they show up for people. And very much both of these almanacs are like farmers' Bibles. They have been a farmer or agricultural Bible for hundreds of years since they've been being produced, but they are not the first book or almanac that has been producing these predictions or affirmations of the way that, as the Farmer's Almanac states, the sun, moon, stars, and planets. That's just one aspect of omens. There are so many different types of omens. So before we get into the Old Farmer's Almanac, and thank you for those joining, Um, Let me just briefly say, within my upbringing on a farm in this lifetime, even though we had the Old Farmer's Almanac, even though we had it every year, it was, like I said, a farmer's Bible. It was always on our kitchen counter, and always being referenced for a variety of reasons. It actually was my grandparents that lived during the Depression in farming, rural, agricultural areas of Montana, that handed down the omens that I remember as a child and that I actively have always participated with this entire lifetime still. And these kind of handing down of omens has really been the way that this information has, been produced until these first almanacs in the United States were produced hundreds of years ago. But like I said, they're not the first ones. So let me go through a brief history of what my book or this first volume of As the Universe, So the Soul is going to have in it. There are the weather omens. There are calendar omens, which are associated with different religious holidays and different saints or different religious figures within different theologies throughout different cultures and civilizations. There are animal omens, which I've mentioned many times before, and I've actively been remembering from a past life as an indigenous medicine person, and that you very much will see if you were exposed to indigenous practices or indigenous wisdoms today from all sorts of indigenous peoples, from the Austro-Asiatic areas, the Indo-Asiatic areas, from the Americas. From the Europeans and Russian territories, there are so many different ways to look at omens, like I said, as usually these indicators of either affirmations of what your current state is, your immediate environment, your current mental, emotional, physical state, what you immediately have been thinking about or dwelling upon or contemplating, or if they're forecasts and predictions of something that you're attracting, that's being attracted to you. And there, these are very, very complex cycles, but there are obviously formulas to it because the Farmer's Almanac will actively tell you that they have formulas. Our weather forecasting systems, the scientific based weather forecasting systems, have formulas for understanding. And a lot of this is based off of the sun, moon, stars, and planets. The Earth being a planet. Oh, sorry, I'm missing some of my notes here. Let me grab it real quick. The Earth being a planet, obviously, um, has different energetic patterns and signals. We're experiencing one here in the Pacific Northwest right now with an El Nino moving into a La Nina. So, in the middle of August, we are going to be having at least a week worth of 60-degree weather, which is absolutely like an anomaly, especially because the last like 3 years have been incredibly hot. And the Pacific Northwest has seen, especially in 2021, some of the hottest weather days in the summer that we've ever had on record. So it's actually very pleasant. I could definitely deal with a lot more of a lengthy fall instead of this incredible heat. But yeah, so there are formulas, there are patterns, and some of those formulas and patterns are astrologically based. Sun, moon, planet, and stars. There is a reason why the farmers of the last couple hundred years have been actively purchasing this as a Bible, an annual Bible, which we'll get into on how to do almost everything. How not just, when to plant and when to harvest, but you'll see for those that do not understand the Farmer's Almanac, how many omens are actually placed in this, which the almanacs will tell you. The current terminology is statistical weather forecasting, and that it's a combination of factors. But don't let this fool you because they know the omens. They know the extensive information that has been handed down for centuries and centuries and multiple civilizations. Like I said, that I am actively resourcing and putting into at least this first volume to get out there so that you will have a guidebook that is much more extensive than the Farmer's Almanac. But what they actually pull from, some of the resource documentation is absolutely these omens, and they have been handed down, like I said, for centuries, normally through oration. So that's how I received my first omens: red sky at night, sailor's delight; red sky in the morning, sailors take warning. That is tried and true omen. Like it is, that is just a formula within this complex system of nature that we live in within the earth, but also within the planetary systems and their archetypal energies. Archetypal energies that, unfortunately, for the majority of Western humanity, specifically in the last, couple thousand years, have been largely taken out of the collective consciousness and knowledge sharing about astrology, about the archetypes of the planets, the energies, uh, the living beingness of planets and, these massive celestial beings up there that have been known to have archetypal energetic patterns for tens of thousands of years, but have largely had that knowledge, taken away from the majority of humanity, especially in the Western world, except for small snippets of it like this that have perpetuated through the years, or indigenous teachings and wisdoms that have carried down. So, first of all, the history, the brief like overview of what you're going to get in the book, in this first guidebook. Um, and like I said, I really believe that this is just the first volume because there are so many resources for this. Think about tens of thousands of years of civilization and culture and history. So the first reference documents that I have sourced really came in 2021 when I had already reached, this level of my tropical astrological wisdom and knowledge where I'd started seeking Vedic and started seeking alternatives to the dimensionality of astrology as a wisdom because I was being called for more. I understood, the generic and the various nuances of tropical astrology at that point, and I'd remembered them under many teachers for many years at that point. And I had had an ancient academic that had started translating a number of different ancient texts and stones, and come to find out, a lot of them had to do with astrologies and omens, having to do with the different cycles, because this is how our civilizations and cultures lived tens of thousands of years ago. And my astrological teacher, and has been an astrological teacher for many people since, his name is Rumen Koloff. And he actually used to attend and live here in Washington, used to attend the University of Washington. And I started taking his Babylonian and Sumerian astrological courses because it was this different dimension of ancient astrological information. And I started channeling once I really started connecting with the planets, and I had really, really intense alignments to their energies from my birth charts, and I was receiving and able to understand a further depth of the planets, of their alignment at that time, how it was affecting me, but actually really starting to communicate with them, which scientifically even has been posited by, noteworthy Oxford academics like Rupert Sheldrake as like solar consciousness theory for decades now. So even though we're having to have our scholars, revet this ancient information into current scientific understanding, it's been here for tens of thousands of years plus. And we actively lived within this. What Ruman found years ago with his translations is that people started attending all of his sessions and seminars because the vast amount of information that he was translating had to do with astrological events and omens and predictions around them. And that is how people lived tens of thousands of years ago and for thousands and thousands of years since. So, those are some of the first translations and academic pieces of literature that you can find in this book, this first volume that I'm producing this year. But it follows through from there. So, because for many thousands of years, there weren't a lot of people that could read and write. And that knowledge sharing, was kept from us. In different ways. We had to orate traditions. That's where epic poems came from, and how people that did not know how to read and write would go to forums and they would listen to the poets and the orators, of those epic pieces. This is where, children's fairy tales and Grimm's fairy tales came from. We orated our traditions and our knowledge sharing for thousands of years, but there were usually always scribes, and the information was there, but for a long time it was being kept private. Not in the past, tens of thousands of years ago, there wasn't the papyrus and there wasn't the obviously publishing and such that we have now. But they had dedicated people, scholars that would, transcribe information and chisel it onto, building facades or Egyptian, obelisks and statues and pyramids and we were still translating information, but the majority of everything was orated, passed down from generation to generation. If you look at Bibles in America from hundreds of years ago, there are families that will have their entire family tree in that Bible. And usually, besides the Bible, will be the farmer's almanac because it literally is, that kind of depth of resource for people. So there's been these traditions throughout all of these different ages where they have translated mostly through oration from one family member to another or from one small town and civilization to another. But, as publication, as people coming in and scribing and taking down and gathering this information, it still happened. So I have been sourcing a ton of reference material that goes under usually title or moniker of folklore, and this information has been being published. It has been being housed, through different religious libraries because those were usually the people that could read and write and that would transcribe things. And those are also omens in a lot of ways because we still carried down these traditions because we were still very, very agriculturally based. This is how we got our food. This is how we bartered with people for things that we needed. We were very, very based within a natural, the complex system of nature of this planet and all the planets and astrologies in the heavens. And so this was very, very valuable information. And there are scribes that would take down and gather this information from certain countries or certain areas, that history's time period. And they would even translate this information and produce possibly just one book. But because those books are from the 1600s or, the 1300s, and because of our, archiving system and our computer system now, a lot of those are public open access. Because they have been, preserved within an electronic form. And so these are some of the different resource documents that you can look forward to in this first volume. And you can see how quickly this will expand about how many different types of omens there are, because the weather patterns are different in different regions of the world, and the people that are interacting with them or the animals that they have in those regions of the world are very different than the other regions of the world. And by civilization to civilization, their practices might have changed. A lot of this stays, it seems like, baseline. As the indigenous wisdom keepers, helped me remember in years past in this lifetime, animal, spirits have had very, very distinct archetypal patterns as well. And that's moved into a new scientific categorization within the last 100 years as well within psychology. And namely, in the turn of the century of the 19th and 20th century, Carl Jung's work on archetypes. So those things have been validated and reclassified into our current scientific understanding, but they're based off of very, very old, similar understandings and ways of living that we have been passing down for generations and generations. So, from ancient Samaria and Babylon to Egypt to all of these different cultures and civilizations since, there are stone tablets, there are papyruses, there are publications, and one hand scribed book from one monk and one you know, abbey from 700 years ago that has now been, open access into an electronic archive. And all of these areas are the resources that I've been adding to this first volume of this Everyday Omens guidebook for people. And we'll get into like how absolutely unique and actually kind of bizarre some of these things are. They have to do with how animals are born, how humans are born, how a woman's birth cycle is, or gestation cycle, animals' gestation cycles. Very, very, very specific, lunar events that enact particular weather patterns because of that celestial cycle at that time of year during a particular type of year. There are so many very, like I said, general, like, red sky at night, sailor's delight. That means it's going to be really good the next day. Red sky in the morning. No, it's going to have a storm. It's going to have something bad. You could have something that is super general like that, that carries through all these different civilizations under different types of monikers and like slight variances. You will see there are so many slight variances to the same formula for something as a predictor or as, an acknowledgement. So let's get into, especially for those that don't know or haven't looked at a farmer's almanac. Like I said, I chose the old farmer's almanac because this is what I grew up with. This is the first one that was ever produced in 1792. And I just want to say, from, the cover, saying sun, moon, stars, and planets, perfect indicator immediately that farmers and us as people, as civilizations throughout the histories of our known histories, we have been living in accordance with nature, this complex system that we have been embodied into, and all of the peripheral systems that are in our universes that impact this, even the dimensionalities, which, I'll get into, especially when I start getting into the omnidimensional authorship canon and the different beings and authors and poets within that, and what we have been translating and producing for thousands of years for society. That's going to go more into the dimensionality. But even in this context, a lot of this is tangible information. You can actively see it every single day and interact with it, watch for it, participate with it. record it, quantify it in your own life, see the value in it every single day. And even in this respect, there is dimensionality to this because, the different aspects of the sun, moon, stars, and how they are in different cyclical patterns and what those cyclical patterns and alignments mean in different contexts. That is very, very important to also understand. And farmers' almanacs get into them. But I want to read this because it's very apropos to how I live my life and how I approach um, uh, remembering knowledge, because everything is just a state of remembering. Your soul is already connected to everything, which is really, really massive to think about, let alone to sit in. But we can't always access everything in a material form because the dimensions, the frequencies, the energies, are not going to be conducive with materiality. But we always, always can be in a state of remembering and accessing. This is what people refer to when they say that Akashic records. This is what people refer to a lot of the time when they'll have a shift. They're just shifting into remembering something that's already here and aware for all of us to be able to tap into. But I found that the way that my soul is designed in this lifetime, actually, the way that my soul is just designed is to go and investigate and to gather the knowledge, to remember the knowledge, to practice the knowledge, to have lived experience of this phenomena, of this knowledge, of this wisdom, and then to help other people remember it as well. This is how I do things. I live the experience and I know firsthand what it is, and then I give it to other people to be able to do with as they want. So the beginning page basically of the Old Farmer's Almanac has a really great quote from Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, who is a German writer in the 17 and 1800s. It says, "Rest not. Life is sweeping by. Go and dare before you die. Something mighty and sublime leave behind to conquer time." Basically, it's saying, get out there and do you, because this is what this embodiment and this experience is all about. And whatever is appealing to you at the moment, great, take it, use it, live it, help others remember it, and move on. It could be super subtle, and not noteworthy at all with other people, only yourself. And it could be monumental, Nobel Prizes, inventing something completely new and unique that helps billions of people. Whatever it is, just go and do it, because that's what our embodiment is for, adding to this very complex systems, memory, and beingness through our beingness. So I'm going to get into some of the different areas that you can look forward to if you go out, and I encourage you to go out and purchase, or at least go to your library and find the latest edition. They're done annually. So this is number 232 because this started in 1792. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the visible planets. Now, this is really important for people that don't understand astrology necessarily, because in ancient Babylonian, Sumerian, and even Vedic astrologies, and mind you, like I said, a lot of how omens are based, it's really this handing down of information that we've already been living as a species for tens of thousands of years, and that we've been trying to help our other, progeny and civilizations remember, so that they would have the benefit of the knowledge that others have already lived by and have already learned by. So in ancient Babylonian, Sumerian, and Vedic astrologies, by the way, they were very exact. They were extremely exact. Some of these omens you'll see by country to country, the different variances of how their sayings about a particular event would happen. But that event, that formula for that event is very, very exact. It is, you know, like I said, some of these are incredibly mathematically exact. You have to have a particular type of astrological alignment to have a particular type of weather pattern. And unless you know kind of like the basis of things, which the Old Farmer's Almanac will help you understand with things like visible planets. So when a planet is visible or a planet is invisible, it has not completely different, but it has nuanced energetic frequencies to it, right? It'll have usually a stronger, more acute in general um, uh, alignment of its energies when you can see it, and it gets even more exact than that. When the planet first becomes visible is a huge deal. It's been a huge deal for a very long time in multiple civilizations because one of the things that's in the Farmer's Almanac, and I'll show you in a little bit, is that they have this glossary of terminology because they're using terms, and this is another indicator of, what they say is a combination of factors about how they predict things. It's because they know the omens. They have all of these omens themselves, and they're looking at these indicators, to put these guidebooks together and have been doing it. Omens are a factor. And you can see this because they have in their glossary different terminologies for astrological events, but they also have them for different cultures and civilizations. Like what we are in right now is normally known as the dog days of summer. This is the end of July until the mid to end of August. It's usually the hottest time of the year, which is why it's an anomaly. I'm wearing a sweater on August 11th in Washington. You know, eh, eh, La Nina. I mean, we have formulas for it. Even science knows these formulas to a certain extent now. But when the Sirius, the dog star, when our basically binary, sun, Sirius, which absolutely was the indicator of the new year to the Egyptians, Sirius has been known as the dog star. So when it had its rise, that is like the beginning of the year. That's when they had all the festivals. That's when they started the year. So a lot of years, a lot of calendar years for a lot of civilizations have always worked off of different astrological events. In Egypt, it was Sirius, and when the dog star like rose, that's the dog star. That's the first time of the year. So it wasn't a calendared system like this human-made egoic system that we've been existing in, or the majority of us have been existing in for hundreds of years now. It was always based off of celestial events because that is when the energies change. That not us telling and dictating to everybody else egoically that, oh, well, it's going to be January 1st now, and this is going to be the beginning of the year, or this is going to be when fall starts. No, we went off of with alignment of nature throughout histories and cultures, what the celestials were doing at that time. So Egypt, Sirius, other civilizations like China have went off of lunar cycles. Some civilizations like Wiccan civilizations have gone off of the new astrological year. To me, the beginning of the year is actually the beginning of the astrological year, which begins with Aries, which is the first zodiacal sign in the traditional 12 house system. There's 13 house, there's even 15th house systems. So there's dimensionality to all of these wisdoms, right? If you're coming from an awareness and a practice of dimensionality, all these different wisdoms have all of these different dimensions of their wisdom, how it was carried out or is being carried out in the past, currently, or in the future, because time is not linear. And, our calendars are not linear actually either. It is very much based off of larger planets that have way more pull than we do as humans on this little planet right here. You know, huge gas giants, huge astrological anomalies and phenomena that are way outside of our scope of current understanding, but our ancient civilizations knew them. So, visible planets have a very, very distinct difference between being invisible. When they have like their heliacal rise, and our ancient wisdoms knew this, when they had their heliacal rise, it signified a shift. So, Venus is known to, and actually the star pattern that a lot of people have affiliated or tried to associate with Satanism and demonic, you know, values and stuff. And that's just one iteration of that. But it is the tracking system of Venus's cycle around the sun, and it makes this, you know, similar star-shaped pattern. It's pretty exact, and so she'll have a heliacal rise, and her archetypal energies in the morning will be if she comes in and has a heliacal rise where we can visibly see her on the horizon again, then and it happens in the morning, then she's in a cycle of being Pallas Athena, which is a feminine warrior archetypal energy. But if she has her heliacal cycle in the evening time, where she is first seen, then she's known as Pallas Aphrodite, or not Pallas Aphrodite, but Aphrodite. And that is a more central feminine archetype. So all of these systems, like I said, there's so many different dimensionalities of them, but that is one of the wisdoms, you know, the combination of factors that the Farmer's Almanac will have for you. And when I said that they have glossaries, astronomical glossary, they are helping people to understand, like it shows a conjunction. Conjunction is a astrological term, right? It's astronomical. uh, I The classification astronomical is astrological or astronomical. So astronomy is the science. Astrology is what is considered occult or esoteric or metaphysical. It's the energetic archetypes of it. It's the cycles of it. It's the zodiac of it. But astronomical is, you know, more the mathematical calculations, the cycles of it. But even this, it has the astrologies in it, when it'll talk about the conjunction and what does a conjunction actually mean of a planet in the sky. So the glossary is extremely helpful and supportive, especially for people if you're just starting to learn astrology, or if you're looking to, if you're being called to start understanding astrology a lot more. An old farmer's almanac is going to be a great place to start, besides going and getting all the YouTube videos, which absolutely go and find YouTube people that resonate for you. That absolutely is a valid knowledge sharing tool now, and used by a lot of people, but use your instinct and your guidance, because you could be vibing with one person at one day, and then in another month or two or a year, you could be leveling up to a completely different type of knowledge. And one of the things that can really help start you is an old farmer's almanac, because they do have a lot of general, uh, you know, astrological information in here, and they purposely keep it in here from multiple cultures, actually. So, one of the other things that I thought was really interesting that they put in this volume number 232 this year in 2024 was the Glossary of Almanac Oddities. So they keep referencing particular words throughout the almanacs that people are kind of like, well, what does that mean? What is that affiliated with? You know, what is the knowledge behind that? And this is where, you know, they brought up the dog days of summer, and where I just told you, Sirius's rise was always affiliated as the dog star, was always affiliated with ancient Egypt's New Year, and you know, other civilizations and cultures have always recognized Sirius as well, as a very significant astrological event and time of year. Unfortunately, the Farmer's Almanac doesn't say that it was the Egyptian culture, but they do have a lot of different cultural and religious affiliations that they put in this glossary. Because one of the things that you'll find is all of these omens, and this is a perfect indicator of that they are pulling from omens in a very generic way for these almanacs because, you know, you see the thickness of these. I had ones in the 80s that were literally like a Bible thick. Like the ones that I remember from the 70s and 80s, these suckers were like Bible thumpers. Like they were big, because back then we were doing a lot of print publications still. We didn't have the internet. We were still mostly orating things. Yeah, we had television and radio, but if you needed a resource book, if you needed a Bible, a guide, if you needed something in your library that you could go to and reference because you couldn't afford to pay for it or whatever, or if you needed to borrow your neighbors, you know, because they bought this year's, almanac, you know, there's a lot of information in there. And so it's become very streamlined and it's very generalized, but this glossary absolutely shows that they are pulling from omens, and a lot of the same omens that are very, very specific omens that I am putting in this first volume of As the Universe So the Soul, Everyday Omens and What They Mean, which is coming out this year in 2024. Um, and my book is going to be a lot more comprehensive because it has the actual sayings around particular omens from different countries. So I've been resourcing various folklore and these, you know, sometimes just one publication that was written down and scribed, you know, like I said, by a monk in an abbey in the 1400s or something, or maybe it was a very, very small print publication because you have to think, you know, in a lot of these cultures and civilizations, they did not keep a lot of publicated books or anything. Books were extremely expensive. And if you were going to have something, it had to really serve a very good purpose, like a Bible that was continually educational, you know, entertaining, informative. You could pull a lot of resources from it. If you were going to pay for something, and that's why families have like these extensive family history trees in their Bibles from hundreds of years, because they hand this stuff down. You buy this King James Bible, man, that stuff is staying with you because publications were extremely expensive. Not everybody could read. It was a rarity. So even in, you know, the 17th century, the 18th century, the 19th century, a lot of people just did not have books or publications. That's why libraries, you know, were founded and formed, at least in the Americas, you know, because knowledge sharing, it's always happened, it's always perpetuated, but it's mostly been oratory. And it was hard to always keep track of it, especially if you didn't have anything. So they were always looking for something that was really, really going to be entertaining, educational, informative on a, you know, on a regular, consistent basis. So anything that was like a guidebook, anything that would have omens in it, yes, they were going to have magazines, publications, maybe small printed, you know, pieces of that certain people could probably afford to buy in the 17th, 18th, 19th century. So there are these publications that did get printed in various countries, and translated from various citizens, and in the Americas, we've had them for hundreds of years. So a lot of these publications are what I'm pulling from, all the way back from Babylon and Sumeria, all the way forward as much as I could find. That's why I said I think this is just the first volume, because there is a lot of information in this world that we have been trying to perpetuate and trying to keep in the collective consciousness about how to live in union in a healthy way with the sun, moon, stars, and planets and earth, right? With the animals, with nature. One of the things that I thought lately, I've heard this saying from Sadhguru before, but I found it very appropriate around omens. Is he told this story of there's these, you know, future scientists that meet God or goddess, you know, an all omnipotent deity or deities. And these scientists say, you know, we've created this AI, AGI, whatever you want to call it, this technology that can produce everything that you've made. So you can retire now, right? The arrogancy of this, right? But And so God or goddess is just like, well, show me what your technology can do. And the technology, like reproduced a human, reproduced a tree, like was reproducing all of this stuff, right, within nature. And God or goddess deity was like, wow, that's really good. Can you reproduce soil? And it's just like, you can reproduce something when you have the origin of something to be able to reproduce from. But how do you reproduce the origin? Because that's where everything has come from. And really, the story is about, kind of man's arrogance to think that we're so much bigger and better than, nature. And we've created these calendar systems to control time and to control nature. But nature is a very, very complex system. All the planets, everything in this material dimension is a very complex system that's been existing for billions and billions of years. If you think that you're going to be able to outdo the billions and billions of years that we as a species have largely always lived and understood we needed to live within, I don't know what to tell you because you don't have the origin. You haven't created the origin of this system that we live in, or nor are you going to be able to. The system already has its origin, and everything is still being perpetuated from that. So living within that origin and the systems within it is something that our ancestors very much knew that they had to do because it was always life or death for them. And that I do truly believe that by my practices, by me re-putting this information and wisdom back out into the world and helping re-perpetuate it within the collective consciousness on a higher level, making sure that I'm extending the information that we have right in front of us nowadays that people can access, but which is still very general in concept and understanding. If we can, if I can continue to help spread and share this remembering of the way that we have always lived within these complex systems and been able to thrive and understand and, co-create and create, the better, that our technologies will be in the future, the better that everything is going to be, because we are a part of these living systems. So some of the other places, one of the other things in this, um, uh, Farmer's Almanac for this year that I don't agree with, and this is when you have a lot of remembering of other wisdoms like I do. They have a piece in here about this April's solar eclipse that happened, and they have multiple pages on this year. But one of the things is, especially that the ancients knew, is that you're not always supposed to witness astrological events because sometimes astrological events actually carry malicious energies within them. And that has a lot to do with what type of astrological event is it an eclipse and is an eclipsing of the sun. Just that context right there. I watched the solar eclipse here in Seattle that went all the way across America, and started here on the West Coast in 2017. And I had a very, very difficult couple of years since. I have been really waiting to shift out of that. And I believe that this year was the year that I was able to finally shift out of witnessing and watching that eclipse because when this eclipse happened this year, I did not watch it. And again, it was over, the Americas. There's been a couple of them. There was one last year as well, that was over a certain part of the Americas. And so you really have to meet with either, a really well known and specifically an ancient Babylonian, Sumerian, or even Vedic astrologer, to understand the nuances of the astrological event. Sometimes meteor showers. I have watched meteor showers. I have really tried to get the information about the particular meteor, what area it's in the sky, what kind of astrologies or houses it's in. Um, because there's a lot of dimensionality to this wisdom. And so, to understand about it, if you're witnessing something, you are directly taking in that information. So if it's a heliacal rise of Venus, and it's in an Aphrodite stage, and you have a tremendous amount of Venus, or Venus is a prominent planet in your chart, like it is with mine, all of a sudden, like, your love radar is going off the freaking Richter scale, and I absolutely felt that this summer, and because I've been able to speak with Venus for years now, and I understand these cycles that she's going into. I understand how they feel and look within my body, within my, mentality, within just people showing up in my life. Situations and experiences that start to happen, it's just like, "Oh my gosh," "Okay, this is the pattern that I'm in for the next couple of years." But you have to really, really sit with and intuit, are you supposed to be watching this event? Because sometimes they do not have the best energetic cycle that they are exposing you to. So, I don't agree with the Farmer's Almanac for putting that in this year. Because I do know that you have to be a lot more knowledgeable about astrology before you just go out and start trying to participate with stuff. It's like an animal. Think of it like this. Would you just go into a lion's cage at a zoo, not knowing anything about a damn lion? Would you even go into a giraffe's cage at a zoo, not knowing anything, ever growing up in Africa, ever knowing anything about that animal? Would you just go up to a wild animal that just happened to be on your trash cans, like a raccoon or a skunk or something like that, if you don't know anything about that animal? Probably not. Like, your instinct is gonna be just like, "Whoa, whoa, like, what is this thing?" Like, you know what I mean? Like, hopefully that's your instinct, because we've had it built into the base stem of our brain, fight or flight, like, we have to survive, right? Astrological events are just like that. If you do not necessarily understand the astrologies of something, sit with it, feel whether or not that's for you. That's going to give you a lot of indicators right there, what kind of energies you're in. If you're being attracted to something, and then if you find out, that it had a particular energetic archetype to it, or if it was considered, some kind of element within the astrological houses, or the cycles, whether it was a square, whether it was a trine. If you end up finding out something about an astrological event that you specifically witnessed and purposely were drawn to witness, it's going to tell you a lot about where you are right now, just with, your emotions and your life and stuff. So, in hindsight, I would always recommend that if you're being called to know astrologies and to remember astrologies and to be aligned with them, which a lot of omens are based within weather and astrological cycles and patterns. It's Consider it just like an animal. If you don't know anything about that animal, are you really going to go and try and look at it? Are you really going to try and go and walk up or get closer to it, or go beyond the fence? If you're watching an astrological event, you're going beyond the fence with that astrological event. Just to let you know, you're going to be bringing in some energy. And do you know what that energy is? Okay, so some of the other areas that you can look forward to in Old Farmer's Almanacs, and this again has to do with omens, because there's a lot of different types of omens, including animals. This is cures, charms, ointments, prescriptions. Um, and so this was really cool to see in here, and it usually is something that they carry a lot of the time. This goes into different, cultures and different cures for things. Ukraine, India, Ghana, Turkey, Italy. This was a really cool chapter, and it went into a lot of different, natural ailments or animal ailments, which again can go into the animal omens that you'll see within my book. Because a lot of that has to do with things like medicines and stuff, things like healing. How is it going to affect your life? Is it going to affect weather patterns if an animal shows up or if it does a particular thing on a particular day or in a particular season? There are a lot of different omens having to do with things like that. Um, One of the other things that you'll find within the Old Farmer's Almanac this year, which was very cool, is they brought up the Chinese astrology and they brought up the possible histories and where it might have come from and, the different orientations of astrology through that wisdom sharing and that kind of dimensionality. Um, One of the staple things, and that was a special, section for this year. The one about the solar eclipse was a special edition for this year because we don't always have solar eclipses or lunar eclipses, where it's visible to a lot of people. And this is based for United States, so that also carries a different variation. A lot of the folklore that I'm pulling from is either United States based or European based. Some of it goes into India, Russia, but not everything like that has been translated over all of these centuries. And so that's why I also believe that there's probably going to be a couple volumes of this book. Or a couple of updated releases over the years because there are other cultures, other religions that have omens on days where I might not have the religion in this first one. I have multiple religions, Jewish, Christian, Catholic. I even have Buddhist. I have multiple religions that are already in this one, but it might not have like all of these different cultures. But one of the things that's consistently in Old Farmers' Almanacs and again speaks to different elements of omens is they have an area about signs of the zodiac, so astrology. They specifically start going into the astrological and look at astrology versus astronomy, um, and they go into these different elements of it, but they start getting into it because this is again omens, gardening by the moon cycles, setting eggs by the moon cycles. These are absolutely things that you will find in the omens. And this is the biggest indicator. So, this is the closest element in the Old Farmers' Almanacs to what you will find in my upcoming book as the universe, so the soul, everyday omens for, and what do they mean? Um, this is the closest thing that you will find in a very, very generalized manner. But basically, what the Farmer's Almanac produces is the best days in the year. And it is for a variety of things. And this is how you also know that they are pulling this combination of factors for how they do their predictions year by year from omens and these different folklore omen hand downs that I have been accessing and different references of them that have been happening for tens of thousands of years. So, let me give you just a short indicator of the best days of 2024 of the different areas. So they have the calendar, January through December set up, and it'll tell you what days for which things. It's a cross reference list, and it's multiple pages long. Like it's 2 to 3 pages long, usually, in every single one of these. So they have the best days for 2024 for quitting smoking, brewing beer, canning or pickling, perming your hair, coloring your hair, straightening your hair, having dental care, painting anything, demolishing anything, weaning animals, breeding animals, cutting your hay, picking fruit, buying a home, asking for a loan, getting married, traveling for pleasure, entertaining, going camping. I mean, it gives you the days of every month for each one of these categories. And this is what you're going to see on a very, very specific level within my book as the universe, so the soul. because they are pulling omens to be able to do this. That is the only way that you really can give a calendaring system like this in a very, very brief, generalized manner that will tell you when to buy a home. Yeah, astrology is part of that, but when it comes to, when are you going to find love? When should you get married? Any of the things that it can't just be astrology telling you when you should do something or not. Guaranteed, they are looking at these ancient omens that we have been handing down and that they have probably had source information and knowledge of since 1792, because during that time, we were publishing a lot of pieces that people had been collecting of these omens that had been orated and handed down through oration for many, many centuries by many civilizations. That's when there was a bulk of these omens that started getting actually published around the same time that the Farmer's Almanac started to come out. So they had their predictors. In fact, humanity has always had our affirmers and predictors because we have lived within nature and the complex system within embodiment in this dimension for billions of years. This has been around. It's the origin system. It is actually where everything comes from, including technology. And technology is not going to supersede what has already been created and that we all have been evolving from and operating within for billions of years. So omens will help us understand that because we've been purposely remembering them and handing them down in one way, shape, or form for tens of thousands of years from what we have as remembered knowledge right now. It's much longer than that. It's very much longer than that. But then you have to get into the dimensional aspects of stuff and being able to communicate with and translate with different dimensional beingness and so we'll get into that in another state. But for today and for this video, this is where, besides the book, my new book that's coming up, this guidebook, As the Universe, So the Soul, Everyday Omens, and What Do They Mean? If you want a very general understanding that gives you lots of entertainment and lots of, basic education around things, you can get the Old Farmer's Almanac or the Farmer's Almanac. At least in the US, it's very much centered towards the US. In other countries, maybe there still is publications and folklore, guidebooks like this that I'm not aware of. But at least around the United States or the Americas, you can still receive this every single year. Like clockwork, you can go to a number of different stores to be able to access this. You can go to libraries, you can go online and purchase it. And it's going to give you a generalization of different topics and elements that have to do with omens and either affirmations or foretelling of particular things. So, but look forward to my book this year and in future years whenever you're watching this, because I have been extensively researching way more than you can ever get in any kind of farmer's almanac, which will be a source guidebook for anybody who really, really wants to, for a variety of reasons, understand what our ancient civilizations and humans did to understand how to live in union with nature and this complex systems that we're living with and embodied with, understanding, the histories of how we've been able to um, communicate the different stories or narratives throughout different cultures and civilizations of the same type of omen, the same kind of experience happening, and how different cultures and civilizations saw that, because my book will have the different variances from different cultures and civilizations around what different days meant. What did they mean for Catholicism and certain saints? What did they mean for Judaism, and certain holidays? There's so much more in this book about how to be able to affirm things that you're experiencing and or how to be able to predict them in the near future so that you can plan ahead, that you can look forward to, and so many different nuances that I am thoroughly going to enjoy getting into with a lot of people because I've been living them and practicing them myself this entire lifetime, but specifically within the last 4 years since I've been researching this book. So thank you for being here. Thank you for going over some of the areas that you can find everyday omens right now and in the future, and how they're applying them, to their publications and for people, and have been doing so for hundreds of years. And yeah, I look forward to leave comments below about any omens, any interesting things that have happened for you in your life lately with animals, with insects, with weather patterns, with seasons. I really look forward to receiving and communicating, with more people around everyday omens and what they mean for us. So, I think next week I'm going to start getting into omnidimensional authors more and start expanding that canon for people. And I hope to have a YouTube live every Sunday at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time as many weeks as I can, because there's a lot of information that I've been gathering as part of my doctoral research, as part of my lived practice, as part of my personal practice, of remembering many many wisdoms, ancient wisdoms, indigenous wisdoms, ineffable beingness, and different elements of energies and frequencies. So, yeah, come back. I look forward to seeing you then, and have a wonderful Sunday.